hiding President Trump in an elevated food container to secret him out of Turkey to avoid an Iranian missile threat. I admit, it is very tempting to start tonight's show with an Air Force One Fugazi that seemed as if it could have leapt right off the pages of a best-selling spy novel. But we will not. We will not. Instead, we will let them speak. Who? Why, the candidates running in primaries in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and South Carolina, races that will provide clues about Democratic socialist momentum and the MAGA mindset in one of the earliest states to attach itself to Donald Trump and his political fortunes. Let's start in Wisconsin, where Democratic socialist Francesca Hung, who I'm sure you have heard, has been critical of Thanksgiving and Halloween, still appears to lead in the gubernatorial primary against Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, who you might remember appeared on the Takeout Friday. The Democratic winner will face GOP Congressman Tom Tiffany. Our Taurean Small today walked with Francesca Hung.
How do you feel going into this night? A lot of attention on your campaign, and a lot of Republicans framing you as this far leftist, out of touch with where Wisconsin's going.
We are feeling strong, determined, and ready to unite a coalition to get wins for Democrats down another ticket and defeat Tom Tiffany. I think the extremist is the congressman who continues to be a puppet for the president. He is who voted to support Medicaid cuts, ripping food share away from our kids, the tariffs that are hurting our farmers. And so we want to focus on the issues that Wisconsinites care about right now.
Is there any information about yourself, your background, that you think voters are potentially missing out on?
I've cooked many great Thanksgiving dinners, and I'm not going to cancel Thanksgiving.
Yesterday, Taurean caught up with Tiffany, who will carry into the general election the baggage of President Trump's low approval rating and voter angst about affordability.
So I voted for things like no taxes on tips, overtime, Social Security. We're doing these educational savings accounts now. There's some really good stuff that we have done. And so at the federal level, there's been some good things happen, but I'm focused on what we can do for the state of Wisconsin. So we can have a governor that just shouts at Washington, D.C. and doesn't get anything accomplished. I'm going to be focused on what we can do in Wisconsin, and that is to make our state more affordable, and we can make state government more accountable to the people of our state.
In Minnesota, there is yet another insurgent versus establishment battle, this time for the Democratic Senate nomination. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan against Congresswoman Angie Craig. Flanagan is the progressive insurgent. Our Jonah Kaplan asked her to describe the current Democratic Party vibe.
I think the energy is in making sure that we are taking that we are no longer nibbling around the edges, and that we're taking on the status quo. I think the Washington establishment is really disconnected from what's happening in the lives of Minnesotans and of Americans. They want bold fighters and folks who are willing to throw down for the things that actually impact their lives.
Jonah also caught up with Craig, who, as you might imagine, rejects the establishment label. She prefers to emphasize her crossover appeal.
Well, the lieutenant governor's been in politics a lot longer than I have. I stepped off the leadership team of a Fortune 500 company 10 years ago to run in a congressional district that had been in Republican hands for 3/4 of a century. I've been able to win over swing voters and lean Republican voters. You know, I'm not sure how you define establishment at this moment in time, because I had never been involved in politics before Donald Trump and before I stepped out to make sure that Democrats had the majority back in 2018.
South Carolina today conducts what can only be described as a hurry-up primary to replace the late Lindsey Graham, who died quite unexpectedly a month ago today. Graham's sister, Darlene, has been appointed to her brother's seat and is now running for a full term with Trump's endorsement. Now, there's a crowded GOP field challenging her, and an August 25th runoff is certain. Our Mark Strassmann spent time with Darlene Graham yesterday.
I'm very honored to have President Trump's endorsement. I think it means a lot to people here in South Carolina, and people should support me because, like I've said, I'm going to work really hard for the people of South Carolina every single day. I'm getting in it for the right reasons. I'm not getting into it for self-ambition, power, or anything like that. I'm still grieving my brother. It would be a lot easier for me just to stay at home and sit on my couch and focus on my kids. But I want to serve the people of South Carolina.
Mark also spent time with a bit of a surprise entrant into this race, former Governor Mark Sanford, who last ran for office in South Carolina in 2018. He lost his congressional reelection bid back then to Trump-endorsed Katie Arrington. So Mark asked the natural question, what does Trump's endorsement for Darlene Graham do to Sanford's chances?
It doesn't help them. I'd be the first to admit that. But, you know, I think what matters ultimately in every race are the ideas that you're espousing, the ideas that you're trying to advance, and the degree to which they fit with where people are coming from in life. And I think what's interesting is, for a long number of years, and frequently I was sort of tilting at windmills, I have talked about unsustainable spending and how it will have an effect.
Now, we do not have a strict seniority system here at The Takeout, but Mr. Strassmann is our senior-most correspondent in our Action News-looking team coverage box. You see it right there. Isn't it exciting? So let us begin with the experience and wisdom that is Mark Strassmann. Mr. Strassmann, take it away.
Well, Major, I want to give you three names, okay? Russell Fry, Ralph Norman, Mark Sanford. Two current congressmen from South Carolina and a former governor and congressman from South Carolina. All of them are also running in this election, where the primary focus is on Darlene Graham. These three men are all experienced, canny operators in the world of South Carolina politics. And when Darlene Sanford was appointed to fill out the remainder of her brother's seat, I don't think anybody here objected. But when she was then pushed as a potential successor to her brother and received the backing of President Trump, that bothered a lot of Republicans here, because after all, an open Senate seat is a plum opportunity for a lot of people. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with voters trying to figure out, do I back the president and do I believe in the Graham name, or to go with one of these more seasoned politicians? And that's kind of where we are here, and why Darlene Sanford Darlene Graham rather, is often asked the question, why do you deserve this opportunity? And her response, of course, is that she promises to fight every day on behalf of South Carolina and South Carolinians. And when I asked her today, well, what's the #1 issue that affects your potential voters and will be the separator between you and the others, she said affordability. So it clearly is a complicated scenario here. As you mentioned, Major, this is almost certainly headed for a runoff. She said as much this morning to us. And so we're going to have to see. Polls close in a couple of hours, and a runoff is all but certain, a runoff that would happen in a couple of weeks. And the question is, which two candidates will make that runoff?
And Mark, in your travels, do voters there feel torn about their choices in any way?
That's a really, really good question. There certainly are a number of Republican voters here who are Trump supporters. I mean, the president is still very popular in South Carolina, and a lot of those voters will take the president's endorsement very seriously. In fact, it may be the decider for a number of them. The question is, for how many? And again, some of it's going to be like, which candidate can bring out their diehard supporters? I mean, it's a lot to ask to come out on a 90-degree day to vote, and we're going to see. The turnout's not expected to be great. Who that favors is a little bit unclear, but all eyes will be on Darlene and what kind of a turnout she is able to generate. And so we're going to see in the next couple of hours.
Mark Strassmann, thank you so very much. I want to go down to Taurean Small, who joins us from Madison, Wisconsin. Taurean, take it away.
Yeah, so far we're seeing this race really narrow down to a narrative around Francesca Hong, the Democratic socialist, who's also a state representative, who's been the center of relentless attack ads from Republicans who've already spent millions of dollars in this race. As you said from the top, she's not the only Democrat running, and her closest competitor is Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, who previously dropped out of the race but returned as it started to thin out and after receiving the endorsement from the sitting governor, Tony Evers. This is a question of whether or not the state is willing or open to accepting far-left policies under the banner of democratic socialism. I have to say, though, Hong's response to repeated questions from me and other people in the press today when it came to those attacks from Republicans is that she's running on policies that resonate with all of Wisconsin, not just Democrats. Housing, affordable child care, groceries, adjusting or giving back the surplus that Wisconsin has at the state level. But as it relates to Republicans, we spoke with, as you mentioned, presumptive GOP nominee Tom Tiffany, the congressman who's a part of the House Freedom Caucus. And Democrats are using that to fire back, saying that he's far too right for this state. This could be a matchup in November if Hong were to secure the nomination tonight of whether or not the two polar extremes sit or fit neatly in a battleground purple state like Wisconsin.
And very quickly, Taurean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did not endorse Francesca Hong, neither did Bernie Sanders, and a lot of the influencers on the far progressive left not there to campaign for her. It looks like she's basically there with her team and her organization as it is. And I've also heard from your reporting that if she wins, she's going to reshuffle that team.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think she's been very introspective today. She's been, as you saw in the sound bites that we played earlier, taking her time in answering these questions because she's been asked about some previously controversial statements that she's made before. I think this reshuffling is, in her mind, an alert that she would have to appeal to a broader tent when it comes to her messaging. And I also got to point out that even though there's been a lot of trepidation from a lot of national Democrats to get behind her right now, Governor Tony Evers yesterday and previously this week said that he would be willing to support the nominee, whoever it may be.
Taurean Small, thank you very much. Third in our Action News team coverage, but first in our hearts, Jonah Kaplan in Edina, Minnesota. Jonah, take it away.
Major, I was going to say, from the state of Walter Mondale, I'm not going to exploit for journalistic purposes the youth and inexperience of Mark Strassmann, but I got you there. Thank you very much.
Well played, sir.
Let's tell you here about... Thank you. I'll be here all day. This is quite a primary because, look, this is another proxy war, another battle for the future direction of the Democratic Party. And you've got, as you laid out very plainly, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. She's been in power 7 years and tied to Governor Walz and a champion of some of the progressive policies that have been enacted by this state legislature here. So we're talking about paid family leave, paid sick leave, paid mandatory, all those things, maternity leave, and also free lunches and expanded benefits for undocumented immigrants. But on the other hand, you have Angie Craig, who is a champion of the moderate wing of the caucus. She's won a Trump-leaning district 4 times since 2018. And so this is really about the future. I spoke with both candidates, and they both talked about kind of the stakes of this, considering who they could go up against. The expected Republican nominee, Michelle Tafoya, who definitely has name recognition in a state that has already elected before a comedian, Al Franken, and a former wrestler, Jesse Ventura.
And in that conversation with Michelle Tafoya, what did she tell you, Jonah, about how she sees the race and what her background as a well-known sideline reporter covering the NFL does to prepare her?
It's interesting. We spoke with her this morning as she voted here, and she talked a lot about her idea of coming off the sidelines, literally and figuratively. That's what she did for her job, but also how she thinks and considers Minnesota a purple state, and especially if you consider going outside the Twin Cities. There is much more to Minnesota and their lakes. There used to be 1 out of every 5 jobs here was manufacturing. Now it's 1 out of every 11. There's a strong agricultural sector here as well. And people are fed up with the fraud crisis that we had here, her words. And she says that this needs to be a state of common sense. Now, yes, I made a joke earlier about Walter Mondale. Reagan couldn't even win Minnesota. But if you look in the Senate races of the past, Minnesota has elected Republicans before. It was only about 16 years ago when it was Norm Coleman who occupied one of those Senate seats.
Jonah Kaplan, thank you very, very much.